One of the many ways we can measure Nishikata's growth as a character is by observing how high competition is on his list of priorities. Usually his rivalry with Takagi takes center stage, and everything hinges on winning and losing. This aspect of Nishikata's character is consistently explored and challenged in today's stories for analysis, beginning with Messages, a story you can find 14 minutes and 50 seconds into episode 9 and is based on the source material's 76th chapter. The story begins as a follow-up to the previous story, Worries. Nishikata looks over the plans he had drawn up for the cotton-filled Jack-in-the-Box and briefly laments his failure. But then, he suddenly smiles, and decides that the attempt wasn't a total failure. This is what I meant about looking at how he prioritizes competition. Eraser Nishikata would have lamented his loss and moved on to the next trick. But the Nishikata we are dealing with now is getting more used to the idea of seeing Takagi as a friend. So while he is disappointed that he failed from a rivalry standpoint, he acknowledges that from a friendly perspective he was able to cheer Takagi up, and that alone made all the work he had done on that Jack-in-the-Box worth it. During their Messages game, Takagi uses a trick that is only possible in Japanese. From what I understand, the Japanese language allows for the dropping of context in between sentences. When Takagi asked Nishikata if he liked steak, answering the way he was going to, Tsukirayo, in most cases would have been fine. The term Tsukirayo, as far as I'm aware, is a term used to express fondness for items and or people. In the context of their conversation, this Tsukirayo would have obviously been referring to steak, but Nishikata realizes that Takagi could easily strip his message of its context and interpret it as, I like you. So to fix this, Nishikata forced the word steak into his message in order to make it impossible to misinterpret. The fact that Takagi saw this response coming tells me that had he not included the context, Takagi would indeed have taken advantage of that. Takagi uses this trick again at the very end of the story, but this time she uses the term herself. When Nishikata asks her if she likes kisu, a Japanese term for kiss and a type of fish, she responds with tsukirayo on its own. In the context of the conversation, she is saying that she likes kisu, probably the fish, but of course Nishikata can and does accidentally interpret it as I like you. At the end of the story, Takagi is rocking some very flushed cheeks and even admits to herself that she is blushing. In terms of the overall narrative, this moment tells me that Takagi has taken a risk in this story and gone a little overboard in regards to what she can manage intimately. We know from previous stories that Takagi will pump the brakes on any interaction that is becoming too intimate for her to deal with. And in one moment where she was thrust into a situation that she was not ready for, she made sure to get away from Nishikata as soon as she could. It makes sense that after the revelation she came to in Worries, that she would be willing to take baby step risks like this in order to improve her own intimacy tolerance, so that she isn't caught off guard again like she was in Critical Hit, especially now that she is certain that she is going to need it one day. Our next story is Eye Drops, a story you can find at the beginning of episode 10 that is based on the manga's 56th chapter. Now, I don't have an awful lot to say about this story besides the aspect of Nishikata's development that I brought up at the beginning of the video. I believe that the defining moment of this story is when Yukari walks in on Nishikata trying to open Takagi's eye. She immediately assumes the worst and leaves abruptly. When Takagi declares victory, Nishikata says that they have more pressing concerns. What this says to me is that their rivalry is prioritized under the appearance of their relationship. Nishikata does not want people thinking that he is in love with or dating Takagi, mostly due to embarrassment and having an extremely low tolerance for intimacy. Takagi's lack of concern over Yukari's interference shows us that she doesn't mind how other people perceive her relationship with Nishikata. This attitude is reflected in the first season's OP song, Iwanai Kedo Ne, with the opening lyrics roughly translating to, I don't mind anyone getting the wrong idea as long as it is with you. The only other main aspect of this story worth mentioning is that it begins a running theme that will permeate throughout episode 10, kissing. For now, it's only a reference by Takagi and a misunderstanding by Yukari, but this aspect of the story will become much more intense in the final story being discussed in this video, Hide and Seek, a story you can find 9 minutes and 15 seconds into episode 10 and is based on the source material's 79th chapter. The first thing worth mentioning in this story is the plan that Nishikata has. If I'm being perfectly honest, a lot of Nishikata's plans are poorly thought out. While most of the time luck and skill are the determining factors of a match, some of Nishikata's attempts at trickery just aren't very clever. The most blatant example I can think of from season 1 is shopping, where his plan is to create enough doubt in Takagi's mind that she slips up. But I even remember thinking the first time I ever watched it that it wasn't a very good plan. Even in this season, April Fool's was a juvenile attempt at trickery that would have not gotten the desired reaction even if there hadn't been a sale. I bring this up because Nishikata's plan in hide and seek stands out from the others for actually being very clever. I can honestly see this plan working with anyone who doesn't have an intimate knowledge of how his mind works. The next point worth bringing up is the characterization given to Hojo, not only in this story, but the previous B-plot story, The Scoop. This may just be me misreading the manga, but in chapters like The Scoop and Hide and Seek, I figured that Hojo was genuinely mature. However, the anime implies that Hojo is putting on a very similar act to what Nishikata did in Coffee and Questions. We see this in The Scoop by some of Hojo's facial expressions and her posturing to Yukari. In Hide and Seek, you might be wondering why Hojo seems so hostile to Hamaguchi when they first sit down, until you realize why they were sitting in the first place. It's clear that Hamaguchi wanted to spend more time with Hojo, and had he openly said that, she likely wouldn't have been as hostile. But given that he made up an excuse, she simply took his excuse to its logical extreme. If you're so tired after only a little bit of walking, you should join a sports team and get into shape. The hostility continues when Hamaguchi offers Hojo a coffee out of his bag and says that he always carries one because he likes them. Hojo and we as an audience know that he is lying, just like Nishikata had in Coffee. However, when Hojo complains that the coffee is room temperature and Hamaguchi apologizes, she seemingly realizes that he must have been carrying that coffee around just so that he could give it to her, and she backs off a little, explains that the coffee tastes better this way, and thanks him. Of course, the ultimate moment of this story is when Takagi leans in to kiss Nishikata. I have a lot to say about this moment, the reasons behind why it's happening, and the potential consequences, but I'm afraid I'll be saving that discussion for the next analysis where I can properly explain myself. But for now, I will say that it might have some negative implications for the climax of the entire season. But that is it for this analysis. Thank you to Orion Tran and Quincy Chamberlain for supporting me on Patreon. If you'd like to join Orion and Quincy or the lovely folks in the Discord server, you can do so via links in the description. Outtakes for this video are available on my Patreon for free or on the Discord server. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.